Sergeant Major Ben Ford.
But that's a different tune to what we want.
When you were captured, first of all?
Yes, because, as I say, it was a natural outlet for the tension that had built up inside you, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Why you shook hands, you can't explain, but it just kind of relieved the tension that was inside you. Kind of think, I'm safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's difficult to put in words. Layman like me, I mean, I'm no author. Author could probably do something of it, but the moment the German asked us to get out of this trench, where
What did he say?
Crouching, well, his words were oust, you know, or words to that effect. And of course we ousted. Naturally, well, I got a revolver hanging down on an holster, like he motioned to it, and I just drew it out and handed it to him.
He didn't ask you to take it out?
Oh no, because he just motioned like, you know, but I understood quite well what he meant. Give it over, like. Well, I did. I got to do, more or less. But he didn't say anything much then, because just then one of the infantrymen came up with his rifle poised, of course, and motioned us to march away. Well, as I was marching down, one of the chaps shouted to me, Captain Morgan's been wounded very badly. And I said, where is he? He said, he's on number 1 gun. Well, that's where I left him, of course. So I asked permission of this soldier if I could just go and have a look at him. And strangely enough, he granted it. He was surely kind of a fellow, but he did, he granted it.
What did he say?
Well, he didn't say anything, he couldn't speak English. His English was non-existent, and my German was non-existent, so he just said, you know, shrugged his shoulders kind of thing, and made the motion that I could go and have a word with him. Well, I went to number 1 gun, which wasn't very far away, and there I saw him lying on the ground, and someone had thrown a greatcoat over him. I went up and knelt down by his side, and I said, how are you, sir? And he just turned a glazed look up at me and said, hello, who is it? I said, it's the Sergeant Major. And he didn't seem to grasp or comprehend what I was saying, so he said, Sergeant Major? Sergeant Major who? I said, it's Ford, sir, Sergeant Major Ford. You're Sergeant Major. But he didn't take any notice, he neither motioned nor spoke. So I took a cigarette out and thought that, like, might comfort him a bit if I lit him a cigarette, and I put it to his mouth. But he hadn't even the strength to puff it, and it just drooped there from his lips. Well, I could see, like, that he couldn't talk, and just then the German doctor came up, and he knelt down by the side of me, and he said, he could speak excellent English, by the way. He said, I'm afraid poor fellow's done for. I said, it's as bad as that, sir? He said, yes, I'm afraid so. He said, he's lost a lot of blood, and as you can see, he said, he's got some terrible wounds. Well, he had. He'd lost 1 foot entirely. The other was badly shattered so that the bone protruded from the leg, and both his hands were shattered. I said, well, can't you do anything for him? He said, I'm afraid not. I said, have you got an ambulance coming up? He said, no. He said, and I can't stop. He said, I must follow my troops. I said, can't you give him any relief of any sort? Can you ask a wagon to pick him up of any sort? He said, I'm afraid not. He said, I'm sorry, he said, but he won't last very long. He said, no, I must go now. He said, but first I must have his pocketbook. I said, oh, you can't take that. He said, yes, but I must. He said, his relatives have got to be informed and I must have some information. I said, very well then. So he took it. By the way, I got it out of his pocket, his captain's tunic pocket. I got it out of his pocket and gave it to him, because there was, I could see there was no information really, except that his rank number and etc. A few particulars about army career and everything. And he said, well, now I must go. I'm sorry, he said, but it is an hopeless case. So with that, we both stood up, and he said, did you know that Japan was in the war? I said, yes, I'd heard a vague rumour. I said, I didn't know whether it was true, but I'd heard a rumour to the effect. He said, it's bad business, both for you and for us. Anyway, with that he walked away. Well, the captain's hat was lying on the floor, and I thought, well, they're not going to have his cap badge. I'll take that. I took it with the idea of keeping it, and if possible getting to know his home address and sending it to his mother and father, because he wasn't married. But I never did find out the address, and I've still got the cap badge today. It's polished up now, by the way. Incidentally, it wasn't a dull one, same as they usually have. You know, they have a brown one, but this wasn't, because he'd lost his original one, and he bought this one, I believe, in Cairo, and it was the ordinary badge with the wheel, the loose wheel on, and I've still got that upstairs. Then, of course, by this time the German sentry or soldier was getting impatient, and he made a movement with the bayonet and the gun, like, come on, get going. So I had to go, and I reluctantly went, of course, because leaving the captain dying there, it isn't an easy job for anyone. I mean, though we'd had many differences in the past, yet still I was very fond of him, because he could be a very nice and charming fellow. Anyway, he moved his eye up about, a matter of about 500 yards or so, and as I was walking up, on a sandbank side, stood the second in command, who was Lieutenant Ronnie Ablett. I don't know whether I'm right to mention names, by the way. And he had been wounded in the privates, and he sat there huddled over, you know, his face drawn and pale, and I said, are you all right, sir? He said, I'll be all right. So with that, of course, I had to pass on. Well, I went
That was all you ever said to him, was it?
To him, yes.
Yeah.
You see, the German wouldn't let me stop again.
No.
So I think I passed another officer a bit higher up sitting on the bank, but I don't think he was wounded. In fact, I'm pretty sure he wasn't. He just dejected, you know. Then, of course, I joined the boys, and I found out there was 200 or 300 of them gathered there. There was fellows from the Buffs, several Indians from various companies, and a lot of my own lads there, you see.
I'll just ask you, for the incident before
Right.
your capture on the gun,
Yes.
can you remember what was
Yes,
said
well, the first indication of any attack coming was that bomber planes came over, or dive bombers. They came over in a kind of a square, and then went over the position. and
This
we-
was where now? This was...
This was the morning of the capture.
And where were you situated?
We were situated south of Gazala.
Gazala.
We were making onto Tamimi Aerodrome. That was our object. Anyhow, these bombers came over and they went over the position. Well, we naturally thought that's okay. We're safe, but no, we weren't. All they did was to go past the position to manoeuvre around again, to come in for the attack. And they dive bombed us. Now, what they were aiming for was to cripple the guns and their lorries, you see, so that we couldn't get away. Well, all they did cripple a couple of lorries, but all the damage they did, in real effect, was to kill a little pup that was on the radiator. And that was all the casualties, more or less, with the exception of a couple of trucks or so, that they did damage. Well, the next thing we heard was the tanks coming. Then, of course, we thought, this is it. Well, immediately we got the order, like, take both tank shoot. Well, my position is on a tank shoot, I take up number 1 gun. I take charge of number 1 gun, and the remaining officers take charge of the other guns. Of course, the gun crew's there together with the sergeant in charge, but you are the officer commanding that particular gun, and they take their orders individually from each commander of the gun. Well, I went to number 1, as I say, rushed down to number 1, but I found that my captain had got there before me, and he shouted to me, "Go and see if there's any ammunition, Sergeant Major." Well, I had to keep a record of ammunition. I knew there was none, and I shouted back, "There is none, sir, it's all at the guns." He said, "Go and see if there's any ammunition." I said, "There is none, sir, at all." He said, "Get the hell out of it and go and see for some." Well, of course, I had to go then. Well, as I was making my way towards the lorries on what was a futile hunt, because I knew there was no ammunition, the bullets were whistling round me by this time, of course, because the charge was coming nearer and nearer, and the tanks were rolling up and firing. And for the most part, they were firing machine guns. They didn't open up with the big guns, strange enough, till they got right close, and then there's only a few shots fired then. But there was all machine gun fire, and maybe a few anti-tank shells were coming past. Anyhow, they became very uncomfortably close to the home of the bullets did, so I decided that discretion was the better part of valor, and I thought I'd seek shelter here. Well, I came upon a communications trench for the signals, which is in the shape of an L. So I dived in that and got down with the signallers. We lay there. Well,
What did they say when you dived in with them?
well, I'm afraid they were a bit panic-stricken, and they didn't say anything at all. I just dived in one corner, you see, and
They didn't mind you being there?
Oh no, they didn't mind, as long as. In fact, you welcome company in a time like that, more or less.
What was their job in the battle exactly? They were just to relay back to headquarters what was going on?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So you jumped in with them, and what did you...
Well, of course, I lay down on the floor, and very shortly after that, I heard a tank rumbling up, and the darn thing stopped right practically on the edge of the trench, and it stopped so near that we could hear the Germans talking, but of course none of us could understand what they were saying. Well, our immediate fears were that they would toss an hand grenade into the trench, you see, and I was deciding whether to jump up and kind of hold my hands up and surrender or what to do. And, when the tank moved on again, evidently they thought, oh well, the infantry will mop these up.
Over the trench?
No, alongside of it he went. It was so close, I say, we could hear them talking.
Couldn't remember what they were saying?
Oh no.
It's in German.
Oh no. In any case, it was garbled because of they were in the interior of the tank, you see.
Yes.
Anyway, close behind them, of course, the infantry came up, and the first words I heard was an officer, or some kind of an officer shouting, "Houst! Houst!" And of course we all got out.
Yeah.
But I'd taken the precaution, when I stood up, of dropping my prismatic compass in the floor and digging my heel on it, you know, and burying it in the sand. I don't know why I did that. I think it was an involuntary action, because the Germans must have had compasses. I mean, and it may have, and if I'd have thought about it, it may have helped me in the future, you know.
Yes.
If I'd have planned any escape, because
Yes.
it would have given me a good guide.
Yes. The Christmas, 1941.
Yes. The day we landed up, I think it was the day previous to Christmas, and of course food was non-existent for the first night. It was near night when we landed, by the way. What had happened was, you see, the reason we were late getting in, there was some fellows there when we got there, by the way. The reason we were late getting in was that the train that was taking us from Tripoli to Gariam was something happened that it was broken off, and they left half the train, which comprised of open wagons, by the way. There's no carriages, anything like. They left half there and they proceeded on to Gariam with the other half, you see. So we stood there for 36 hours, and I mean stood. We never sat down for 36 hours.
Why didn't you sit down?
There wasn't room. There was 64 of us crowded in this one truck. And with the exception of a couple of breaks for nature, and you had to be darn quick over them, I'll tell you, because you were no sooner out than the old high-tie guard was shouting you back again and threatening you with a bayonet. With the exception of a couple of those.
Did you protest about being in there, having to stand in there?
Well, it wasn't any use. We did protest, and that's it. We hurled all sorts of epitaphs at them and all this.
What did you say?
Well, I didn't say a big lot, but you could hear the mutters like dirty wog or lousy bee, something like that, you know. All sorts of things, you know, all the epitaphs they could think of at the moment. But we stood, as I say, there 36 hours. Well, next day the train came back and took us off. We landed at Garian, and of course it was 7 miles up the mountain, we calculated, taking the twists, you know, and turns. And we landed in this Garian barracks, an old cavalry barracks it was, the night before Christmas, like. And then on Christmas Day, when that dawned, the high-ties seemed to be in a generous mood and promised us extra beef and extra beans. Well, the time come to cook it, and then they found out they were short of firewood. And they got very little firewood, so that when the beef eventually did come up, it was half cooked, and we found weevils in the beans. So we didn't enjoy that meal very much.
Did you protest about it?
Oh yes, we protested through our camp leader at the time, with the one we'd elected. We protested to the Italian authorities, but it didn't make any difference at all. They said they could do nothing at all about it. They said that they were short of firewood. They were sorry, but they were short of firewood, and that was that. The weevils, well, I suppose they regarded them as incidental. But they didn't do anything about it. We had a drop of coffee, all natural, by the way, no sugar, no milk. And that was all we got that day. I think they found, oh no, I'm sorry, we did get a ladle full of macaroni. And so we had to make that do.
Were you hungry by the time?
Very hungry, oh yes, definitely.
How did you...
You see, by that time, we'd had no food, only in dribs and drabs throughout the march and capture, which incidentally took us what? Oh, about 2 or 3 weeks to get to there, because we were taken to Benghazi at first, and we were lodged there at a transmission camp for I think it was about a week. Well, the food there was scanty, of course.
So you were hungry on the march?
Oh gosh, yes.
Through the Garian Mountains?
Oh yes, we were always hungry. We were always hungry until we got established in a permanent camp.
How did you feel when you were hungry? I mean, could you march? Could you walk?
Well, yes, we had to. You see, there was always the fear that you would be shot or something if you lagged or dropped out. Although some did drop out, but there was no danger of them being shot, because I believe they were taken on a lorry. But they had to be really bad cases. And you'll understand that when I say that we marched, the day we captured early on in the, I would say the forenoon, and we marched all that afternoon, all that night, until the next day, and then we were picked up by lorries and conveyed to Barshi, I think it was, and there we went into this wire cage, as it were, you know. And we spent a night there, and we just had one issue, one big square Italian biscuit. That was all.
How did you feel? Did you have an empty stomach? Or?
Oh, you can't describe the feeling. I mean, it's a terrible feeling. You're depressed, you're hungry, and I do mean hungry. I mean, it's an hunger that you don't feel in normal circumstances, you know. You feel that you could eat anything. Doesn't even perhaps the tops off turnips or something like that. You feel that you could eat. Because
could you work and think properly?
Could you?
Could you work and think properly?
Well, yes. I wouldn't say that you had any brainstorms or anything like that. It didn't affect your brain as regards that, but you were desperately hungry, and you'd always got the hope that the next camp you get to, you'd get a good meal, but you never did. The most you would get would perhaps be a ladle of macaroni, if you were lucky, and one of these square biscuits. Now in Benghazi, when we were in there, we did get a couple of issues of a kind of a tinned meat, what we used to call tin bully. Of course, it wasn't the bully beef that the English Tommy knew. I don't know what type of meat it'd be. Maybe it tasted remarkably like veal. I'm not sure it was, though. I couldn't say it was. It was quite palatable and quite pleasant, and of course very welcome. And then they gave us a tin, I think, when we started out on the journey from Benghazi to go to Tripoli, and one loaf, or was it 2 loaves? I'm not certain about that, but because at that time our rations were 2 loaves then. Mm-hmm. Loaves consisting about of a piece of bread the size of a bun. Uh-huh. Size of one of those hot cross bun things, you know. But I don't know, I couldn't describe the hunger feeling, you know. It was terrific. And to crown it all, we had a halt on the road before we got the next day. We had a halt, and the old German threw out his rations, of course, to eat them, see. And our chaps were just standing there, open mouthed, looking at them, you know, longing. But of course, even Jerry hadn't got a lot. He'd only got his black bread, a little of cheese, and this synthetic margarine in a plastic cup. It was noticeable that they edged up to the Germans that were eating. Some of the chaps did, you know, hoping that the Jerry might take pity and give him some. I think in 1 or 2 cases, 1 or 2 did get a bite, but very few. There were several tunnels dug.
And this is PG-59?
Yes, in the camp. Now, they'd always boasted, the Italians had, that this camp was impregnable. No one could get away. Well, our blokes proceeded to explode that myth. And they did it 2 or 3 times. Well, the incident, the Welshmen have got away about 5 or 6 times. Well, anyway, our lads thought they'd have a go. My particular hut, the hut that I was in charge of, they thought they'd have a go at digging a tunnel. And a right damn good job they made of it too. They got within about a yard of the wall, and I would say the hut was what? I bet it'd be 30 yards away from the wall, easily. Oh yes, easily, good 30 yards away from the wall. And they dug down under the boards, under the floor, and along to within about a yard of the wall, before it was discovered. Yeah. Well, of course, when it was discovered, we had everyone who was anyone in the hut. I was sent for, the camp leader was sent for, and several other sergeant majors were sent for. And of course the old colonel of the commandeer of the camp, the old colonel, was there, and he was exclaiming, you know, his hands were going, and he was quite voluble in Itai. Of course we couldn't understand a word of it. The old Marshal, you know, he was a grand old stick in a way. He was a martinet for discipline, but he had got a spot of humour, and he was a whimsical sort of a fellow too. But of course on this day he was furious naturally, and he was saying like, you will all be punished for this, punishment all round, the leaders will be punished. So by and large, I don't know what the Italians were saying at all, you see, because I couldn't understand it. And, well, in fact, very few of us could. Even the camp leader couldn't understand it. They'd only picked up a smattering, you know, just enough to get by. And anyhow, it boiled down that we got to have some punishment for this. The hut would be punished by having all amenities stopped, such as bathing, amusements, that is like going to theatres or anything like that. And we had got to have some form of punishment.
Did you have a camp theatre, did you?
We had a bit of a camp theatre, yes. The punishment that they finally meted out to us was that we'd be put in prison within the prison camp. And they selected a hut for it, and it was wired all round. And so there was the camp leader, the second in command, the confidence man, myself, were put in this hut. Oh, and I think the captain, one of the captains, I'm not sure whether the doctor wasn't put in with us. I'm not sure about that though. Anyway, we went into this hut and we were in there about 2 days. Well, it wasn't so bad. All the lads used to come to the wire and give us expressions of sympathy. And
what did they used to say?
Oh, they used to say, kind of, cheer up, you'll soon be out, your sentence will soon be over, and all this. And so one or two of them used to say, like, oh, you're better off than we are. At least you've no roll calls to go on, you know. When we used to have to go on those every day, and sometimes you'd have spot checks. Checks, we used to call them. And as I say, sometimes you'd be called out at night time and have a spot check, or sometimes very early morning. But normally it was about 11 o'clock when you went on the check. But we didn't have any, because all we was, they just come and had a look in the hut and saw that you were there, and that was it.
And that was it.
But we were only allowed to remain there 2 days, and we were rather enjoying it, because contrary to the chaps in the rest of the camp, we could have our light on all night.
Did you have any dreams when you were in imprisonment?
Yes. Now, I'll tell you an amusing incident comes to my mind about that. I was sitting next to a chap we used to call Dixie Dean. His name was Dean, but we called him Dixie, you know, christened him. And he said one morning, "What the hell was up with you, Ben, last night?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, suddenly," he said, "you sat bolt upright in bed, threw one arm up," he said, "and started spouting a load of gibberish." I said, "Well, I don't remember it." He said, "Well, I can assure you he did." He said, "And some of the other fellas heard you too." And apparently it was true, I did do that. So I must have been having a nightmare. Now, I don't recall what it was, because I don't remember the incident. But that's what he told me.
Did you ever dream of home?
Well, yes, we did dream of home, yes. But maybe that was self-induced, because your thoughts were always on home, you see. For instance, lie on your bed with nothing particular to do, and your thoughts would turn to home and what you would do when you got home. Same as, oh, I'll see that my larder is stocked with all kinds of food. You know, that was the topmost thought on everyone's mind, was food. And one of the peculiarities of the lads was collecting recipes for foods. All sorts of recipes. I myself did. I collected several, oh, quite a number. Different Italian dishes and Balkan dishes and stuff like that, you know, thinking like, oh, well, when I get home I'll practice my hand making some of these, like. I wish we never did. Anyway, well, your thoughts, as I say, turn to home and what you do, and you also pictures yourself having long walks in the country. A thing that we only had 2 walks while we were in 59, and we thoroughly enjoyed them. They were really something out of the blue, you know. I can't tell you the joy they brought to you. Just beautiful days, 2 beautiful days. And you could picture yourself kind of taking long walks, and it didn't matter what the weather was. You didn't care at that moment what the weather was going to be. You'd take these walks regularly, and oh, you'd do things that were humdrum in ordinary life, you know. You'd do all these things, but needless to say, when you got home, you didn't.
Did you ever dream of Mrs. Ford?
Well, yes, of course, naturally I did, and dreamed of the various things we should do together. For instance, I planned good holidays, which I couldn't have before the war with the wife, because, let me be truthful, I didn't earn enough money. As you'll appreciate, in those days, jobs were scarce, money was hard to come by, so the only holiday I ever got and was with the TA, going away to camp. And the wife had very few holidays. In fact, I think she had more holidays during the war than she did before the war. I'm pretty sure about that. She went out with this friend of hers, she told the girls about, Abby. But as I say, I used to dream about, like, oh, I'll take the wife to the seaside and all this, that and the other, you know, and we'll live it up a bit, kind of thing, you know, because we had an idea that money would be easier after the war. In any case, our funds were building up, if you understand me. You see, our credits were building up with the army. Needless to say, they were cut down by the tax and all.
Yes.
We didn't know that at the time. They would be, but they were.
First tape. At one stage there was a big mix-up. You opened fire by mistake on.
Oh yes, but that was before my capture.
Yeah,
quite a while.
Yeah.
It was on the advance. We'd engaged the German column of Lorry's infantry, and we'd been doing a dash in a mile square, opening fire, you know, dropping the gun, opening fire, and then dashing to another on another handle, in about a mile square. Well, old Jerry kept advancing despite our gunfire. He kept coming down, and a very audacious thing happened here. I didn't tell you this in the story. I overlooked it. The Jerry was advancing on 2 flanks, you see, say right and left, and he got a cover at the back, but that didn't seem to advance. Only the right and left flank seems to be advancing and trying to close in. Well, first of all, we saw a very light squad. There was a red, a green, and a red, I think. Then, damn me, a German came with a motorcycle and sidecar, a German officer in it, and we could see it quite plainly, straight across the front of us, to the other column. Must have had a few words, some plan of action probably, and jiggered off back again.
And nobody fired at him,
Nobody fired at him, not a single shot, no. And he was within rifle range. No one opened fire.
Why do you think nobody opened fire?
I don't know. I think they were too astounded. I think everyone was too astounded, too taken to by the effrontery of it, you know.
You used to, in PG 59, you used to organise camp concerts, didn't you?
Well, I did do a few kind of improvised concerts, but never a big one. I never organised a big one except the one as Mr. Cheeseman's got the menu of. Not the menu, the
Programme.
the
Programme of.
the bit of a programme I made out.
Oh,
you know.
yes.
That was the biggest I ever had a hand in, and I was assisted, of course, by a couple of Pompey and
Yes.
another lad.
Did you used to introduce the acts?
No, I didn't do compare. No. Oh no, we compare as such wasn't really known, you know, more or less. It would just be somebody, one of the chaps that had something to do with it would probably just come in front and announce like, and now we have Bill Jones on singing a song, you know, something like that. But not anything like comparing it, you know, nothing like that. In any case, we got far too many turns to go on that night to do any long compare, you know, because if you look at that programme, you'll see that there's quite a number of it. I remember, perhaps, when, well, did Tug Wilson tell you when they burnt the lavatory door in Campo? Well, they did. They burnt the lavatory door down for firewood, you see. So, of course, there was a bit of a stink about it, and I remember distinctly one bloke turning round and addressing no one in particular, saying, well, by God, that'll be known as the hot squat from now on. Because they weren't toilets, you know, they were holes in the floor, drain pipe, and you squat down, you know. So it's very appropriate, the hot squats. That stands out in my mind a bit. I thought of that just after you'd gone, or was it, did I mention it when you were here?
No, you didn't.
No, well, I thought of it just after you'd gone.